to remind all of our presenters about how much time you have. You probably want to leave a couple of minutes for questions at least, and we may only have time for a question or two. Those of you who have attended ATJ board meetings this past year know that we stick to these guidelines on the agenda, because if we don't, then the people at the end of the agendas always get shortchanged. And so we've allocated these times, and I don't want to be disrespectful to our presenters, but you all know that as well, that I will remind you and I will have to cut you off at that time. The board just held a working session meeting. One of the things that we voted on in order to make sure that everyone has access to what's discussed at these meetings, especially in this day and age, that the meetings will be recorded starting today. So please keep that in mind, making your comments, that these meetings are being recorded, and so that other members of the Alliance who are unable to participate today, but may be interested in what other Alliance members are doing, especially addressing the COVID-19 situation, can then go on and look at these meetings, just like if they were, as if they were here. Remind everybody these are public meetings and anybody can attend, not just Alliance members, and we're trying to give full access to everyone about what is going on. The other thing is remain muted, if you will. Don't unmute unless you are talking, because as you all know by now, the feedback can get very badly. You can send messages by the chat. I try to monitor those as we go along. Plus Bonnie and Diana have agreed to help me monitor the chat discussions if a question comes up. And you should all know about the raising your hand icons. For those who are on the phone, my understanding, you can raise your hand by pressing *9, and you can get your hand down by pressing *9 as well. Once again, I'm Sal. I go by he, him, his. I'm the chair. Usually we would do introductions that would take up the rest of the hour and a half we have scheduled for today. And the reason we're limited to hour and a half because of Zoom fatigue. Try to keep everybody focused. So know that this meeting will end at 11:30, but we want you to stay engaged during the time because we are going to be hearing from different Alliance members. So we're going to forego introductions. You can all hopefully see at least people on the screen. I encourage those of you who are just showing your face or picture, go ahead and put live cameras. At least we can see that you're engaged with this meeting. I know Zoom is not perfect, but it allows us to at least see some reactions. Thanks, Denise. See, you just popped up, and Aaron, appreciate that. See your smiling faces this morning. All right, so let's move on. April board meeting. So this is for a board member vote. Any corrections, additions, or amendments to the proposed minutes? Seeing none, going to ask for a show of hands for board members. All those in favor of adopting the board meetings as prepared, raise your hands. Looking on. Thank you. Any opposed?
Fred voted yes.
Okay, thank you, Fred. Any abstentions? Okay, motions to approve the minutes are adopted. We're going to first hear from Janet Barron, who's going to give us an update regarding healthcare. Janet, you just heard my introduction, 10 minutes, and yes, I am strict on that. So, you know, people may have questions, so keep that in mind, but you have until 10:15.
Okay, well, I will give an overview. Can everyone hear me? Can you hear me? Okay, great. Hello, everyone, and I hope you and your families are staying healthy. Healthcare is pretty, and I'm the director of Northwest Health Law Advocates, so just wanted to make sure everybody's aware. This is our organization is part of the ATJ network. We do a lot of support for legal services and attorneys on healthcare issues, and we also do policy advocacy, systemic advocacy at the state level, and connect with many organizations that are healthcare organizations and social service organizations trying to get people access to healthcare. So COVID-19, of course, brings healthcare to the forefront for everybody, and I think it's a time when we're all recognizing both the need of everybody to access healthcare, but also the kind of systemic issues that clients of of ours face. The race equity data on COVID cases is pretty shocking, especially for the Hispanic group. As reported, the number of cases, the percentage of cases that involve people of Hispanic, Latino origin is around 30% of the total cases, and way disproportionate to the percentage of the population that group represents, which is around 13%. And the hospitalizations too, 22% of the hospitalizations are people in that group. That there are also issues for the African American population, which is 6% of the hospitalizations for 4% of the population. So just to frame the issues, and there are probably a number of reasons for this. We are seeing a lot of language access problems for people who are limited English proficient. There is a lot of work now being done to try and improve the dissemination of information about COVID-19, but we also know issues that may be contributing to this are working conditions, especially, you've probably read about the meatpacking plants issues, the agricultural industry. People are just not getting the protection they need and allowed to be socially distant. And so there's a lot of advocacy going on around that. Of course, many of these folks are considered essential workers, so they're still working during the pandemic. So many causes, I think, but just be aware that that's a big issue. We are also hearing from hotlines and folks in the community, in the Latino community, that people who are trying to get access to testing for COVID are hitting some dead ends if they are limited English speakers. So the governor just announced a language access plan that they are putting in place. Hopefully that will do something to address this. Okay. We also are hearing that there is a lack of interpreters at testing sites. So we're trying to follow up on some of that information. In terms of access to care for the uninsured, there are programs that have been rolled out or are rolling out to try and address this. The state has expanded its emergency Medicaid program for immigrants who otherwise would qualify for Medicaid, except for their status. So if their income is below 138% of poverty, they should now be able to get any sort of testing, evaluation, and treatment for COVID-19. And this includes even if somebody didn't have a positive test, but they had the symptoms that might have been COVID-19. So that's helpful. And then the federal government is now rolling out a program for providers to get reimbursement for uninsured people, regardless of income or immigration status, for testing and treatment. That is a limited pot of money, so it's not clear how far it will go, but it is being made available next week. So hopefully providers will not be turning people away for being uninsured. A lot of the healthcare, so the healthcare world, as you probably heard, is pretty stressed by all of this. And the Community Health Center Network, we've been hearing updates about what they're trying to do. They are really stepping up, but they need more funding. They and many other providers have had to cancel non-COVID related kind of preventive care and surgery, elective surgeries and things like that. So there is a concern that people who should be getting, check-ins are not getting checked, and people that there's pretty much no more dental care going on at the community health centers, so access to dental has become a bigger problem, except if you have an emergency. So I think everyone's anticipating that this will go on. This will lead to non-COVID treatment, additional needs for treatment and health issues going forward. The Health Benefit Exchange has reopened for enrollment through May 8th for anyone who would qualify. But of course, after that date, people can still enroll if they've lost a job within the past 60 days or have other life qualifying events. There are many issues now in nursing facilities because of COVID-19. There are issues around people being transferred out. There are just concerns about people's health status, even if they don't have COVID-19, because of the way that healthcare workers have had to focus on COVID-19. So in general, that's an issue. Telehealth it's great to have the technology to be able to provide many services. There are people who do not have the technology and who cannot access those services. So, you know, these are just problems that everyone's trying to wrestle with, but they're ongoing. So that's pretty much the report. We have a webpage, nohla.org, that's nohla.org, where we're trying to get up information as quickly as possible on healthcare access. There are lots of other pages. The Healthcare Authority has one, the Exchange has one. So in terms of health benefits, there's a lot of information. The big point I want to make is that the $600 weekly unemployment payments are being disregarded, not counted for people applying for Apple Health Medicaid, so that the systems aren't quite caught up, so the advice is not to report that income if you're applying for coverage. Otherwise, you might be told you have to pay premiums and cost sharing through the exchange where you really qualify for Medicaid. This income actually will be counted for the exchange, but the systems aren't caught up, so they're just telling everybody don't report that. There's a story collection tool, and we're really interested in keeping an eye out for stories. So Children's Alliance has set that up. I will put the link in the chat for anybody who's interested. And just know that other benefits are also, non-health benefits are also being offered during the pandemic in a broader way than they usually are, including there's a disaster cash 1-month payment that anyone could qualify for regardless of immigration status if they don't qualify for other benefits. It's $363 for a single individual. So I just wanted to mention that because that's new. So that's about it. Happy to answer questions. Thank you.
So who has questions? Raise up your hand. Looking, any hands? Jim Bamberger. We probably only have time for one question, but we'll go.
Janet, thank you so much for your report. What I did not hear from you is the impact of COVID-19 and access to health services in Indian country. Do you have any updates on that?
No, I don't. But I can check into that and find out and put some information about, up on our website.
Okay. And Esperanza, I saw you had your hand up. Because of that short answer, we can take one more. That's yours.
Sorry, just the information that you have that is very important. Do you have that in other languages?
So there is information in other languages on the King County website. I'll get you that too. And we've been advocating to get information in other language. The insurance commissioner has now posted some information on their website that relates to commercial insurance. And the Healthcare Authority has translated the flyer on the emergency Medicaid program. They call it Alien Emergency Medicaid. So that's translated into, I think, 13 languages. So that is available at hca.wa.gov. they have a coronavirus button that you click, and then a whole bunch of information, including those translations.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Janet, so
You're
much
welcome.
for giving us that update. And everybody, you know how to get a hold of Janet if you have further questions after this. We're going to move on now to COVID impacts on the following client communities. We're going to start with youth, and we have Aaron and Annie. And I don't know which one of you two is going to go first on that, but you've got it. I see Annie's hands up. So Annie, the two of you have until 10:25.
Great, thank you, Sal, and hello, everyone. It's great to see so many people online. Aaron and I have split up our time, so I'm gonna just dive in. For those of you who are less familiar with Team Child, I just wanted to remind folks that we are one of the specialty legal aid organizations that focuses on youth. Our kind of target area is youth who are at risk of or already entangled in the justice system. Our focus areas of representation in the civil arena are to address education, healthcare access, housing stability and homelessness, basic needs, and then barriers that come up related to court involvement that our young people are having. Originally, our focus was on 12 to 18-year-olds, but in the past several years, we've expanded our scope to include up to 24-year-olds. There are really common issues, especially for systems-involved youth and all of the research around brain science and developmental approaches. There's a real natural extension of the kinds of advocacy that young people need and that we can do for them. Our offices are give us a bit of a statewide presence. We have offices in Yakima, Spokane, Pierce, and King counties. And we also have a statewide project specifically working with youth who are incarcerated in our state juvenile prisons. Really early on, we had all of our staff set up to work remotely, and we've been reaching out to our current clients and all of our community partners and continue to get referrals across all of our offices and projects. In regard to sort of our approach under COVID-19, I think one of the things that we turn to is the state plan and the hallmarks as some of our important guideposts for addressing needs of youth and young adults during COVID-19. And the things that I think Aaron will also talk about and that we are also paying attention to, what Janet touched on, is the race disparities. Race equity is a really important theme in all of the work that we're thinking about and doing. And included in that is the concept that we've had for many, many years in our alliance, is not leaving out marginalized groups or groups of folks that are hidden from kind of the mainstream. So youth fall into this category, and criminally involved youth are especially marginalized because of that particular system involvement. The other hallmark or state plan guidepost is that we really recognize that as we're scrambling to meet need, that we need to really pay attention to the full spectrum of legal tools and strategies that we're committed to. So that starts with legal literacy and education, all the way through having systemic reform efforts combined with individual representation. So what we're working on and what we wanted the ATJ community to be aware of, I'm going to talk about a couple things, and Aaron will fill in the rest. Many of the strategies for job protection, stimulus, housing assistance, they're not being accessed or utilized by youth in the same way as adults. And so especially for older youth and young adults not living with parents. So we're really trying to emphasize addressing the legal literacy and education around what rights to benefits are, because people won't even need lawyers if they don't know how to apply for things. And so we're thinking and strategizing around community partners and who are having more direct contact with youth. We're also working pretty closely with coalitions across the state on reducing the number of incarcerated youth in our state and county facilities. At the state level, there's probably about between 600-ish youth in the state prisons. The county facilities have been doing a lot around reducing detention, but there's some outlying counties that are not doing a lot. They're sort of business as usual. So we've done both systemic advocacy together to write letters for broad release strategies, and then we're also doing targeted individual representation to accelerate release dates and reentry. And then the final category that I'll talk about is education. So we are hearing and seeing that resources and remote learning is not uniform, and the responsiveness to the needs of client communities is not as great as the more vocal middle class who have recently experienced homeschooling. And it's a big concern. We are also really aware of the number of youth that were out on school discipline or disengaged in some way or another. There's very little activity or proactiveness on the part of districts to either rescind exclusions or be more supportive for remote learning opportunities. So that's a big population of kids that are going to go further behind as a result of the COVID quarantines. And then finally, there's a growing group of advocates across the state, and we are really involved in addressing the needs of youth with disabilities who need more intensive and individual support in school. There's a huge variability in what's being offered and what's being done to make up for lost time. So I'm gonna pass it on to Erin so she can talk a little bit more about some of the other areas that we're advocates for youth are paying attention to.
Great. Thanks, Annie. So Erin, you're up.
Yep.
Got a few minutes
I
here.
run
You
a
can
legal
take
counsel
questions here.
Youth and
Go ahead.
Children, also known as LCYC. We provide legal services to young people from toddlers to 24 years through 4 main programs: child welfare, juvenile court, youth and family immigration, youth homelessness. We serve King and Walla Walla counties. We do not have, nor have we ever had, a shared office space. So we have 13 attorneys that are used to working from home and in the community. We use our direct service work to inform our systemic advocacy with partners like Team Child. In our experience, strong partnerships with non-legal service providers are instrumental in advancing the state plan goals around legal education and awareness and the delivery of holistic, client-centered services. Increasing the legal literacy of educators, shelter staff, and case managers for youth and young adults has had a direct impact on young people's access to justice. LCYC's model is similar to the Benefits Law Center's Fantastic Justice Bus. We go to where the young people are. We're visible in team members in communities, schools, shelters, and drop-in centers. At this time, we're not physically present in these spaces, so we've had to revamp our outreach plans to a more virtual strategy. We follow our outreach efforts and the resulting referrals to ensure that we are connecting with young people who are disproportionately impacted by the child welfare and juvenile court systems and homelessness. So we're looking to make sure that we're reaching immigrant youth, youth of color, youth identifying as LGBTQ, all of who are overrepresented in these systems. When we're calling our community partners at this time, we're, in addition to giving them updates on LCYC, we're checking in with them to find out what they're struggling with, what questions and worries they're hearing from young people, and what ideas they have on how LCYC can use our existing capacity and expertise to better support the partner and to jointly serve young people. In response to suggestions from community partners, LCYC's made different changes, such as creating an online referral form, allowing youth to text us to initiate services. We've developed resource pages that are geared towards young people on our website for King and Walla Walla counties. We've opened up our youth homelessness program to serve youth in extended foster care without other civil legal issues. And we've expanded outreach to more McKinney-Vento staff. These are school staff who are focused on supporting youth that are experiencing homelessness. With the closure of schools and stay-at-home orders, youth are far less mobile. They have less points of contact with providers and other concerned adults, which has amplified the value of LCYC's ability to partner effectively with schools so that we can reach more youth. I know in my home, my kids in high school, junior high, and elementary, they have contact with their parents and their teachers. And that's really it. So our ability to partner with those teachers helps us to access those young people in need. At the same time, I think the school closures and the growing gap in educational access and success that Annie mentioned really places a spotlight on the need for Team Child's ongoing leadership in dismantling that school to prison pipeline and looking at the inequities within education. As a final note, I just want to reemphasize the issues around race equity. I think it's undisputed that the COVID-19 is disproportionately impacting people of color, which is not based on a biological predisposition, but because of a long history of systemic racism. And as a civil legal aid community, it's critical that we continue learning and advancing equity for all different groups of identity groups who are experiencing ongoing discrimination. There's an urgency to the moment that can lead us to desire to move forward quickly without including all the voices that are needed to generate and implement good ideas. There can also be a desire to just stop the flow and to be the Band-Aid, but equal efforts need to continue on undoing institutional racism.
Great. Thanks, Aaron and Annie, for that update. We appreciate the work that you're doing out among the community. We'll hear from Denise next about the impact on the LGBTQ community. Denise, I saw you here. There you are. Okay, you have until 10:35, Denise.
Great, thank you so much. I also want to introduce Sara Mustre del Rio, who is one of our wonderful UW interns this quarter, and will be with us through the summer. So I just wanted to let Sara say hi, so you all know who that person is, who's a name that is not usually in this meeting. I made a little PowerPoint presentation for us, so I'm just gonna go ahead and share that. And I will say that I can see that my dog is like gearing up to freak out about something happening in the alley. So if I have to suddenly mute and run, go do something else, that is why. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about LGBTQ community legal needs under COVID-19. The TLDR version is that systemic discrimination got us to where we are, and our survival and resilience networks are what are getting us out. So I wanted to give just a quick intro about what the LGBTQ community in Washington looks like, just because I think that there are sometimes a lot of stereotypes about our community that we are, for example, that are a very small community, that we are a very white community, that we're a very upper middle class community. A lot of that is left over from the way that the marriage debates happened. But our community is 5% of the overall population in Washington. We are 5th largest in the country. I'm not gonna run through all of these moment by moment, but the basic themes are that we match the general population in some ways, for example, racial distribution of the population, and we are disproportionately young, which means that many of the industries that we are involved in and the economic stability that the general population might have had, our communities do not have. Our legal needs pre-COVID-19 demonstrate that, and this is from the 2016 Supplemental Civil Legal Needs Survey, demonstrates that a lot of the stuff that we are seeing in terms of vulnerable populations is hitting our communities especially hard because we are overrepresented in those populations. And so specifically the starkest differences that we are seeing is issues related to homelessness, issues related to intimate partner violence, and a lot of issues accessing shelter. And then the ways in which our communities experience discrimination are statistically higher as well. It's a lot of times it's very intersectional discrimination. So the way that COVID-19, that what we're seeing in terms of economic impacts of the pandemic is that because we are disproportionately low income and living in poverty, the ways that this pandemic has unfolded economically is hitting our communities hard. We are twice as much represented in the top 5 hardest hit industries that include service and retail, as well as K through 12 education and healthcare. And importantly, this is a number from prior to COVID-19, but I think it really impacts where we are today and the ability of LGBTQ communities to access some of the benefits and leave structures that have been made available. 20% of LGBTQ people have reported that they simply don't request sick leave or caretaking leave because of fears of discrimination. Because often that would require disclosing their LGBTQ identity. So folks are not, the leave access might be there, but if you're in a discriminatory workplace, it might as well not be there. The thing I really want to call out about healthcare impacts on LGBTQ communities is this last number here, that LGBTQ people, because 8% of LGB and almost 30% of trans folks report healthcare refusals or discrimination when accessing healthcare, that means that our communities are 7 times more likely to avoid visiting the doctor, to avoid discrimination. So what that means is that even when we may be sick, we don't feel like we have access to the networks that would help us. And I'll turn to what that looks like in terms of legal needs in a minute. I did want to call out a couple of really specific things here. One is some information about LGBTQ experiences in the legal system that, again, you know, this is all about how does a community that is marginalized access services when they need it, and the issues that brought us here don't magically go away. And so I was really shocked by this number in terms of legal system access, that 53% of trans and gender nonconforming folks of color report experiencing discriminatory comments when they have access to the courts. That's a national number, but I think that, you know, I don't sense a lot of exceptionalism in Washington in terms of those experiences. I definitely anecdotally hear things that reflect that from communities. Importantly, in terms of homelessness, because many of the shelters and social services are either sex segregated or are explicitly religious in mission, our communities are feeling very vulnerable. Our unhoused, specifically unhoused and unsheltered communities are feeling very vulnerable. There was a very high profile situation coming out of New York City where the organization Samaritan's Purse, that was in charge of administering emergency health care in Central Park, had an explicitly faith-based anti-LGBTQ clause that they were asking volunteers to sign. So not only could LGBTQ communities not show up to support and be involved, but also that means that LGBTQ people, I mean, we know from generations of interacting with these social services agencies what our experience with a religious provider is going to be. And so that means that LGBTQ people are much more likely to self-select out. That is true also in Seattle. I wish it was different, but we do have municipalities, for example, that are looking at making contracts with explicitly religious providers, and that really impacts our community's ability to access services. So to turn to like what I actually am seeing communities do, I kind of put this inner circle of what some of the issues are that our community came into this crisis with, and then what we and other organizations are doing to deal with that. And the really salient thing that we are doing is, we have our LGBTQ legal clinic. We're meeting weekly. We have been full every week. And we've put out some community education materials on social media, like some Instagram graphics, some one-pagers, and then some webinars and documents on healthcare directives. But what we're trying to do most is bring our services into connection with non-legal services, because so many folks are like, I don't have a legal problem, I have a discrimination problem. And so what I am seeing my communities engage in is the same networks of resilience and survival networks that we generated during the AIDS crisis and that we have generated during other economic and social crises for a long time. So we are making each of these sort of elements, for example, where religious service providers may be exclusive, I'm seeing my communities rise up and create mutual aid networks with one another. And sometimes those are as unofficial as like the Seattle Queer Exchange on Facebook, where LGBTQ people who are like, can somebody spot me $50 for rent this month? Or can somebody help me get a ride to this doctor's appointment, right? Mutual aid networks are really integral to what we are doing. And then cross referrals and information delivery, not coming from us, but being passed through non-legal groups. So I'm doing a lot of like popping into community meetings that may be happening online to say, hi, this is who we are. Like, this is, here's some really basic stuff. And if you need us, for one-on-one conversations, we're available. Because that really builds that trust and helps community understand their legal rights as integrated with other parts of their lives and their survival networks.
Denise, I'm going to give you a 1 minute warning here.
Great. So we have already met our clinic numbers served for all of 2019. We did that last night with our clinic. There's a lot of fear-based legal services. So we are not seeing things like requests for our Family Matters clinic that does adoptions. We are not seeing that drop off. And that is because people are really worried. They want to get their affairs in order. They want to make sure that they have the documents that they need so that if they come down ill with COVID, they're going into a hospital or a healthcare environment where they can be sure that they will be respected in their gender identity and not experience discrimination. Here's some of the legal clinic themes we're seeing. A lot of this is related. It's essentially the same stuff that always happens, but COVID is complicating it. So, and then these existing sort of experiences are also kind of exacerbating the issue. So for example, we were able to work cooperatively with LCYC with a client who needed an identity document change that they were not able to get, and that the inability to get that affected their ability to receive benefits because they couldn't open a bank account, right? So it's these cascading legal issues. We are seeing a ton of people, because particularly trans folks come in and out of employment because of discrimination really frequently. We do see a higher number of folks who are excluded from unemployment benefits due to overpayments because they, maybe they came into the system previously, had an overpayment that they couldn't pay back, and now are unemployed and shut out of the system. And then I want to make one final point, which is what we are dealing with so deeply right now is actually a lot of fear and isolation being exacerbated by federal actions. The Trump administration, for example, just initiated a new rulemaking, or is completing a new rulemaking, I'm not sure where it is in the process, related to basically that would allow medical providers to simply not treat trans or LGBTQ people based on their individual beliefs. That is a very, very, very alarming development. It does impact us here. And as my 12-year-old is pointing out, it's happening right in the middle of a pandemic, which is particularly scary for our community. And so I think what we are doing most is trying to bring education that is in a format that people can use in the moment. So if they, so when they're accessing healthcare, they have basic information about what the status of their rights are, and some tools for self-advocacy. So it's not just like RCW blah de blah says that you get to access healthcare without discrimination, but that if you do experience discrimination, ask to talk to this person in the hospital, and then this person in the hospital, and then this person in the hospital, and then call us if you need us. So those are the things that we are seeing, but the developments on the federal level are really terrifying for our community. And I think the distinction between our state rights and our federal rights is one that we are working to educate on, but is a huge barrier right now.
Great. Thank you, Jody, for that update. We really, Denise, thank you for that update. Really appreciate it. Now we're going to move on to Jody on nonprofits. Jody, are you there?
Yep, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I'm going to share my screen. So Denise, can you stop sharing yours?
Oh yes, sorry about that. Thank you.
Sure. Let's see, where is it here? Here we go. Oops, sorry. Okay, so you can see my screen, right?
Yes.
So I'm just doing a quick update on the impact on nonprofits, and I added small businesses because we do both nonprofits and small businesses thought it would be of interest. So in general, what we're seeing, the legal needs we're seeing is help on the CARES Act, the PPP and EIDL loan. There's lots of confusion, there's lack of access. We're seeing lots of employment law questions around furloughs, layoffs, unemployment, paid leave, which is all affected by the CARES Act and the Families First Act. Seeing lots of landlord-tenant questions with the moratorium on evictions and folks not being able to pay rent. Landlords are still asking for their rent because they also have to pay their mortgages. And so we're trying to encourage folks to have communication with their landlords and start negotiating landlord lease amendments before the moratorium is lifted, so that because once the moratorium lifted, they'll be in default and could get evicted at that point. We're seeing communities of color, obviously, and small orgs and businesses are generally not getting access to federal funding. I'm sure you've heard about it through the news. And in this part, the lagging about 2 weeks is just my anecdotal experience, is that I feel like the communities of color folks are lagging about 2 weeks behind in getting information. So, March 27th, the Act passed, CARES Act passed, April 3rd, 1 week later, access to funding was released to the banks. And there was a rush, and then within a week and a half, they ran out of funding. And right about that time was when we started to get calls from organizations in communities of color saying, hey, we want to apply for PPP loans. And like, it's a little too late, but there will be another round. So that's just my anecdotal, is like, we're lagging behind a couple of weeks in terms of information. What we're seeing in terms of nonprofits outside of legal services on our capacity building side is they're asking for grant writing help because there's a lot of new funding opportunities. Fundraising issues, help with fundraising because of COVID, a lot of cancellations of fundraising events, and just in general planning around, delaying on their contract deliverables because they can't gather where a lot of their contracts or foundation grants were funding events and things like that, and now they can't do it. So some consultation, we're getting requests around needing to plan around that pivoting and that delay in programming and funding. So Communities Rise, I just wanted to go over what we're doing to respond to all of this. We've been working like crazy to get our COVID-19 small business and nonprofit legal clinic launched. It launched this past Tuesday. It's a whole new program on a new platform to be designed to help a high level of requests, a high volume of requests quickly. Our old model, or not our old model, our existing model is much deeper touch, high touch, and it's not as quick, and we can't help as many people at one time. But because of the high level of requests, we've invested in a new platform. And so we've launched this new clinic. We've lowered the eligibility standard. So it's any nonprofit or small business in Washington state that has 50 employees or less and has been negatively affected by COVID can request an appointment. There's 60-minute phone or video conferences with an attorney. We're doing a significant amount of outreach to BIPOC communities. We're providing translation and interpretation in materials, as well as in the actual conferences or consultations. We're partnering, this new platform is a partnership with Lawyers for Good Government, ORIC, and Perkins Coie. And so that's our clinic. It's up and running. In the first 2 days, we've had 12 requests and we're matched within a day. So as we said, it's just started on Tuesday. And that was, as of yesterday, we had served or matched up 12 people. These are the areas of expected areas of needed legal expertise. I mentioned the 3 big areas: employment law, the federal loans, and leases, but we expect other areas of questions as well. We've already gotten some questions about potential bankruptcy and exploring that opportunity. I mean, not opportunity, that option, unfortunately. This is the lawyers, because we're partnering for Lawyers for Good Government, some of the sign up and platform stuff is through them, and some of it is through Communities Rise. On the attorney side, all of it is from Lawyers for Good Government. You go to this link and you can sign up to, lawyers can sign up to volunteer. On the client side, it's all through Communities Rise. So they just, the client facing stuff is all through us. These are just some other things that we have going in addition to the clinic. We've created a lease amendment toolkit that has template documents and an instructional video. It's not quite up on our website, but will be very soon. And we have short toolkits for the federal funding, PPP and EIDL, including short walkthrough application videos. It walks through nitty-gritty application line by line. How do you fill it out? Along with updates and supplemental materials that's available for clients and attorneys. And we just got CLE credit for this on our website. On the capacity building, the nonprofit, non-legal side, we have our grant writing clinic where grant writing writers, they can make an appointment to meet with a grant writer to edit their proposals or help framing, and fundraising clinics to meet with a professional fundraiser. And then we're thinking about doing some sort of short-term coaching to help nonprofits do short and long-term planning around their changes in programming and funding streams. And the other thing we're hearing from POC nonprofit folks is that they want to connect with each other and hear what other folks are doing and how they're doing. And so we're thinking about putting together a sort of a social gathering to get to connect folks. So what can the ATJ ATJ Community do to help us, Community Rise? We would love for you to help us get the word out to communities, to your communities all over the state about our services, particularly our clinics, our legal clinic, and also encourage all of you and your volunteer, your attorneys and your firms and communities to sign up to volunteer. And we have lots of resources, by the way, for attorneys in terms of getting them up to date on the federal funds and all these other areas of law. We have training videos and just like update materials for folks so that they can feel prepared to meet with clients. And that's it. Did I make my time?
Great, you're perfect on your time. I saw a question come up. Can you define affected by COVID? Because you said we can.
Yeah, as long as honestly, we are not being very strict about that. We're just asking them to say in their request, like, how have they been affected by COVID? We're not using it really as a screening, but we want to know, did their income go down? That sort of thing. So yeah, I was trying to figure out how to unshare my screen.
Thank you for that presentation and the information. You guys are doing great work. Next, we're going to hear from Murph on farm workers, how it's been affecting farm workers. Murph, I saw you earlier. Murph, there you are. You have until 10:56.
Thanks, Elle. Thanks, everybody. First, I wanted to give a little bit of background so you can think about what farm workers, what position they were in before the virus, and you can think about how the virus would impact them. So there are approximately 80,000 farm workers in Washington state, most of them in 5 counties in rural Washington. Of those 80,000, about 30,000 of those workers are H-2A workers. H-2A is a type of visa. So those workers are in the United States legally. There are recruiters that go mainly into Mexico and bring workers here. We have represented several class actions for H-2A workers because some of the conditions are abhorrent. There was a recent report that came out from the Southern Poverty Law Center calling H-2A working conditions close to slavery. And I think I said this, 99% of our agriculture workers in Washington state are Latinx. Most of the migrant workers live in camps, in bunk bed settings, in congregate dormitory style settings, or in tents. If you are living in one of those, in order to get your food or do shopping, you are put on a bus of 50 to 100 people and taken to a store, left in the parking lot for an hour or two to do your shopping, and then taken to the next store to do your shopping. And you all shop together in this very large group. So this is what was existing. In the field, you work close together, you share food, you share water facilities, you share bathrooms, you share equipment. So COVID-19 is coming in, and here are workers living in congregate facilities. And as we know, most of the spread of COVID has happened in nursing homes, on cruise ships, in hospitals, in Western state and Eastern state. So these congregate settings put people at very high risk. Farm workers and their advocates have been extremely concerned about the risk of COVID. There was an outbreak in British Columbia, about 80 miles from a camp, I think in Okanagan County. There has been some testing happening with farm workers. In Wenatchee, one of the farms that's actually trying to practice social distancing decided to test their workers, and 42 out of approximately 80 to 90 workers tested positive. The Department of Health and the Department of Labor regulate farm worker housing, the Department of Health, and work site conditions in the fields by the Department of Labor. Both of those departments issued fact sheets. These were not enforceable, but they were suggestions of what farmers and growers could do to protect agricultural workers. We thought, and in working with NJP and their farm worker unit and the workers themselves, they were insufficient and they were not enforceable. One of the recommendations was to have farm workers that tested positive for COVID on one side of the dormitory and those that were not tested positive on the other side of the dormitory. That, of course, is incredibly insufficient. We talked with an expert and said, absolutely not, there's no barrier. One of the growers' recommendations was to use bunk beds, but put screens. Again, plastic screens, sort of like a train birth. And public health experts have said that that is not enough. And so of those 80,000 impacted folks, about very few, I would say less than 1%, have been tested. So testing is a huge problem for farm workers. So what did we do? These rules came out. We wrote a letter to the governor with many other organizations. We wrote a letter to both agencies, and they refused to provide, am I getting a question? Refused to provide actual rules. And so we filed a lawsuit representing the United Farm Workers Union and representing Familias Unitas, which is also a farm workers union, and asked the court to force the state to engage in emergency rulemaking. The state decided just for housing to issue emergency rules. Though the comments on those rules were due on Monday, and we commented on those rules saying what was necessary in order to protect farm workers. And testing is necessary, isolation, making sure that there is social distancing within the camps. And in some ways, it's next to impossible to ensure safety. There have not been emergency rules issued yet, to my knowledge, for agricultural worker safety in the fields. The federal response has been, on the one hand, to declare these workers as essential workers and yet not provide a safe workplace or issue any federal regulations about keeping workers safe. Instead, the proposal has been to reduce those wages. So we issued our comments in each of the areas, asking that there be separate cooking facilities, because for all of the facilities, almost all have common cooking areas, common bathroom areas, and to create separate ways that farm workers can use the bathroom and use cooking facilities. We are extremely concerned about death rates among farm workers. One of the reasons for the concerns across the country is because farm workers are afraid of retaliation. Currently, the system that the Department of Health and the Department of Labor has put into place is complaint-based, and they have been refusing to change it to an enforcement-based system where they actually come out and inspect to make sure that farm workers are safe. Because of the retaliation, the fear of medical care, the fear of deportation, even for farm workers who are here legally, there have been cases where those folks have still been arrested and put in detention, even though they are here legally. So that fear is broad and that fear is real. So we are hoping through the emergency rulemaking process that we can create enforceable rules to make farm workers safe, and we can get the other agency to issue rules through this litigation. We are working to educate agricultural workers and working with unions to do that as well. We want the state to issue the information and education about COVID-19 and how farm workers can protect themselves in many languages, in English and Spanish, and also in Mixteco and the different dialects, at least 2 dialects with Mixteco. So far, that has not happened. There has been misleading information in the news media and in other sources that has not been helpful. We've worked with NJP, and they are putting out information in the newspaper that gets distributed to camps and to farm workers with accurate information. The other piece we're doing is we have put together for all workers who are undocumented information about their rights are. There's misinformation that workers who are undocumented cannot access FMLA leave through the state, and they can. There are other benefits that are available to workers. We have now had those documents thanks to a $2,000 emergency grant from LFW into 6 languages. We're hoping now, we are working with a community agency and have put in a request to have those translated into both dialects of Mixteco. So what can the ATJ Board do is to continue to talk about agricultural workers, to make sure that people who are undocumented are not left out. As many of you know, undocumented workers are not eligible for state unemployment insurance. And so there is a movement happening to create a fund for unemployed workers who are undocumented, as well as other workers who are not eligible, to support those kinds of funds, and to support benefits for workers who are undocumented, and to make sure that when we talk about the court systems, that they are open to all, and that there is language access as well, which is a whole nother bigger issue. But please distribute all the materials that we have that were sent out to the ATJ listserv. And for everyone on the call, when you're thinking about the food that you eat, the food that you're buying, and the food that you have, remember who is making that food. And please talk about to your friends, to your colleagues, to your family members, that we have to keep farm workers safe.
Well, thank you. I think we had time.
I did it.
It should be a quickly answered question, I think.
I'm done.
Here's the question: where can we find that information that CLS has put together regarding rights for undocumented workers?
It's on our website, and it's there in all 6 languages. So columbialegal.org, and there's a red strip across the top for COVID information.
Great. Thank you.
columbialegal.org. Thanks.
And always thanks for your work in CLS. Much appreciated. Next, we're going to hear about the effects upon Native Americans. I understand we're going to hear from Jen Yogi and Teresa Norton from NJP. And I saw at least Jen earlier. There you are.
Yes, hi. And I think Teresa is on as well. I'm going to share my screen.
I'll give you a 1-minute warning, but if you got until 11:06, you keep an eye on it.
Sounds good.
Great.
Is that working okay?
Yep, we see you.
Okay, great. So, hi everybody, good morning. So my name is Jennifer Yogi. I'm the managing attorney of NJP's Native American unit. And as Sal mentioned, I'm here with Teresa Norton, who is an attorney with our Bellingham office. And we're gonna be highlighting some of the issues that Native Americans, particularly in Washington State. A little bit of background about the NAU, as we call them. And we provide direct legal services for Native American client team, as you can see, and we can't meet all the needs of the Native communities here in Washington. And so we work with our field offices who are providing legal aid in their service areas to the tribal communities in their service areas. And we focus on those issues that are unique to Native people as a result of their political status. And I'm going to just turn it to Teresa for a second to talk about the incredible work that she is doing in her service area.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to participate. I work in the Bellingham Regional Office and collaborate frequently with the NAU. We, in our service area in Whatcom County, Skagit, Island, and San Juan counties, we have 6 federally recognized tribes. And so our work frequently involves providing legal services to low-income Native American communities.
So just to give you the macro picture, as I'm sure has been discussed by many of the those that spoke before me, that we know that COVID-19 is exacerbating existing inequities. And so one of the major challenges that Native American communities face is their invisibility in mainstream media and discourse. And that invisibility means that racial disparities in education, health, poverty, homelessness, those persist without recognition or adequate response. And just as an example, in the health context, we know that those with underlying conditions have greater vulnerability to COVID. Native people have higher rates of cardiovascular, compounded by the lack of adequate funding for health in Indian country. IHS is a chronically underfunded, or Indian Health Services is a chronically underfunded agency, and that really puts tribal communities at a disadvantage in trying to adequately, protect their members. The other issue that we're seeing
Hey, Jen, you're
already is the in-tribal prizes. This article points to Kalispell's
hey, Jen,
sorry,
so you're cutting in and out a little bit. I don't know if there was anything.
can you hear me okay? Uh-oh.
So
Yes.
what you try doing is just make sure you're
Yes.
facing the microphone, and that might help. And otherwise, it's just Zoom problem.
Okay. Okay.
And everybody else, make sure you're on mute.
We'll do that.
Well.
Okay. Is everyone seeing okay, here we go.
Yeah,
okay, so just again emphasizing the impact of tribal enterprises. So that impacts both the individuals who are laid off or furloughed. These are major employers in the region, but it also impacts the funding those enterprises receive, which often go directly to essential tribal services such as education, social services, and so it impacts not just the many employees, but also the tribes as a whole. And so I just want to highlight the need for greater awareness about that challenge. Okay, Therese, can you hear?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay.
Specific to COVID-19, Native clients face a number of barriers. They have multiple challenges accessing the Corona tax relief programs. Some clients aren't even aware of the program. One client, a senior disabled Native client I spoke with the other day, had no clue that he'd be receiving an economic stimulus payment. For others, when they apply, relief programs are delayed or denied. We also see, particularly in our Native communities, that the exacerbation of an issue with the lack of technology. 36% of Native students do not have access to the internet at home. And many clients in our rural areas don't have smartphones or have very limited minutes on their phones. Another issue is a lack of bank accounts to access quickly either the economic stimulus payments or unemployment insurance benefits. Next slide. Our response to the impacts of COVID-19 on Native communities is informed by what the tribes and Native community-based organizations are doing for their own communities. Tribes are doing a lot to increase health, safety, and security for their members. Here are a few highlights pulled from the headlines. We are hearing that most tribes have increased their food deliveries for elders and children, some redistributing the food supplies from their closed casinos. I heard one tribal casino distributed over 800 pounds of meat when it had to close.
And some are also using treaty hunting and fishing rights to meet the needs. We learned that the Nez Perce tribe sent some members to Montana to hunt bison within open and unclaimed lands, and that meat was then distributed throughout the membership.
And some tribes, like the Lummi highlighted here, are developing innovative programs for COVID-19 testing and treatment and enhancing their healthcare delivery systems. You can also see here a photo of some Colville, from the Colville tribe area agency on aging making masks for elders. Most have ceased cultural gatherings such as powwows. Some tribes have implemented curfews and closed their reservation boundaries to non-tribal members as means to stop the spread of coronavirus. Next slide.
It's freezing. Hold 1 second. There we go.
Tribes
go ahead, Therese.
Tribes are also
I'm sorry, that's me.
Tribes are also responding to housing and unemployment issues. For example, in the face of mass layoffs from tribal enterprise and government, some tribes are offering assistance to tribal members to apply for expanded federal unemployment benefits. They're also opening computer labs so that people can apply online and file weekly claims. And to address the housing issue, we are seeing tribal housing authorities temporarily suspend mortgage payments in tribally owned housing. This is one example from the Swinomish Indian tribal community.
So in terms of what NJP and the Native American community are doing to respond to these needs, just as a relevant factor to know is that there's 29 federally recognized tribes in Washington state, as well as significant urban Indian communities. And so each of those communities is different. They have different challenges and have varying resources. So we are trying to respond in coordination with our field offices and other partners by trying to develop a range of actions depending on the particular needs of those communities, taking into consideration that there's not one way to approach that. So just some of the things that we are doing is adjusting our priorities. One of the first steps we took is to work with the Unemployment Law Project to create a flyer that was widely disseminated in different tribal communities, letting them know about their rights to unemployment benefits and how to get help with that. We are also developing a Know Your Rights flyer that we're hoping to distribute with meal and food deliveries in an effort to reach those without reliable internet or cellular access. And we're also exploring virtual clinic options that we would do in partnership with urban Indian organizations and tribal governments to do, for example, like to provide greater access to the stimulus funds. And then I guess in terms of what ATJ can do, we would really welcome and need your ongoing support to carry out these initiatives. We're going to need resources to fund printing the flyers, technology for the virtual clinics, and then the reality is that these cases just take more time, and so having additional staff is going to be important in the coming months and years to help address that need. So thank you very much. I don't think we have time for questions, but if we do, then we're available.
Okay. And we can probably take the questions offline. If you have questions, you know how to get Jen and Teresa. Yep. Thank you both for giving that presentation. Next, we're going to hear from Will Lively, from the EJC. Will.
Hey everybody, thanks Sal. I'll be quick. I'll focus on two things that the EJC has been doing recently. One, with our federal advocacy, and two, with our messaging work. We were supposed to be on our annual trip to DC last week to meet with our congressional delegation about funding for the Legal Services Corporation. Obviously that didn't happen, but we did have a series of calls with members of Congress and their offices, not the entire delegation, but a good portion, and those calls went very well. I want to thank Justice Steve Gonzalez, Fred Rivera from the Mariners and the LFW board, WSBA President Rajiv Majumdar, and some other people who joined in on those calls. I would say the most important things that came out of them were our advocacy for the Legal Services Corporation annual budget, but also specifically for LSC funding in the next round of federal stimulus. I know Cesar is going to talk about that a little bit more in detail, but they got $50 million in the CARES Act and are looking for $50 million more in CARES Act 2, or whatever the next round of stimulus is in the next couple weeks. So we had a very positive response from the delegation. I think the most important piece is Representative Jayapal offered to start circulating a sign-on letter in support of that LSC request amongst the House of Representatives. So we'll be following up with her office to make sure that happens, because that would obviously be a huge help. On the messaging side, we have been focused on trying to elevate the frontline role of legal aid programs and all the work that folks are doing in the media a little bit more, to try to project how that work could be enhanced by more funding at the state level, both from the emergency funding that I know Jim is going to talk about in a likely special legislative session, and other opportunities. So that started out with the op-ed from former Chief Justice Fairhurst and Fred Rivera that I sent around a couple weeks ago, and we're hoping to use that as a template for more op-eds along similar lines. Our chair, Kirsten Barron, is working with Rajiv Majumdar on an op-ed for the Bellingham Herald And we're also working with New Justice Whitener on a potential op-ed for the News Tribune and hope to continue that with more publications around the state. And we also like to get a lot more earned media news coverage of the frontline work that programs are doing. So I've been working with OCLA and NJP and the Pro Bono Council and others on developing some media pitches and messages, and hope to start seeing a lot more of that featured in the next couple of weeks. There is going to hopefully be a story any day now in the Spokane Spokesman Review, a profile on Julie Rep and the work that the Unemployment Law Project is doing. And I would love to work with as many programs as possible to get that out. And we'll be sending out some more formal messaging guidelines and media pitch strategies to the whole alliance probably next week. So be on the lookout for that. And I also wanted to thank the ATJ board members for, I know a lot of you participated in the digital advocacy and sending emails to your members of Congress last week about the LSC request. And thanks for spreading the word on that.
Great. Thanks, Will, for that update. I appreciate it from the EJC. Next, we're going to hear funding reports, 5 minutes each. And we'll start with the federal report from Cesar. Cesar, you have 5 minutes.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Sal, and I really appreciate everyone's presentations today. As Will mentioned, excuse me, as Will mentioned, there was a component of the CARES Act, the first CARES Act piece, that included $50 million for the National Legal Services Corporation. The LSC request to Congress in anticipation of the CARES Act had been for $100 million to assist programs in responding to the COVID crisis. LSC traditionally uses poverty population. It's a formula-based distribution of LSC funds when Congress appropriates funding. But in this instance, LSC used poverty population and then adjusted as a factor in deciding the distribution of the funds. They included a 4-week unemployment level factor, which resulted in NJP receiving almost $150,000, almost $200,000 more than we would have received on a purely poverty population distribution. We received $1.17 million. We're being awarded $1.71 million to respond to the COVID crisis. LSC is very focused on pursuing the balance of the original $100 million request in anticipation of the demand and the needs that the COVID crisis will certainly, that people are experiencing and will continue to experience over time. As such, LSC is urging that folks quickly get this money on the ground and get it spent. A portion of the $50 million, by the way, was used to assist programs to offset some of the costs associated with going remote. NJP spent over $125,000 in going remote by virtue of the number of staff that had to be relocated. It involved countless technical and a lot of technology expenditures. Let's just leave it at that. What LSC did on the technology front was they stood up a very quick application process with a maximum $25,000 grant to reimburse programs for those costs, and NJP did receive the $25,000 maximum grant under that small piece of the CARES Act money. So NJP is in the process of setting up a sort of an emergency temporary hire process or hiring process, and we're working on the outlines of enhancements that we're going to need to make. We've identified as necessary to make and that we can use these funds for. First of all, we're looking to enhance clear capacity. Certainly, while there has been within the number of cases that we have the number of cases that we've had have continued to come in at a not too dissimilar rate than our usual pace. But the mix of cases has changed a lot. And of course, there's a significant number of calls associated with unemployment and housing that has, the mix of cases has changed. And also including many family law and DV related problems that are, some of which obviously domestic violence, everyone is aware there's been an intensification, but on the other hand, there have been all kinds of issues around parenting plans and supervised visitation and so on. So we, particularly the expectation, of course, is that when the courts open, when the moratorium is lifted, there's going to be a significant explosion in demand. And our plan is to enhance CLEAR with specialized hires, not the general CLEAR attorney that requires all kinds of training, but probably have attorneys who are already experienced in housing and focused on the housing, to focus exclusively on housing, to support certainly the housing justice projects and to handle the increased volume in that area.
I'm gonna have to cut you short here. 5 minutes goes quickly. I apologize.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No. Thanks for that update. I'm going to hear from the state update from Jim now.
Thank you, Sal, and thank you to everybody else who is here and who's also out in the field as frontline responders to the crisis. The Office of Civil Legal Aid has been working to secure resources from both state and federal sources. We were notified on Wednesday that we were awarded $3 million of emergency state dollars targeted to legal assistance for unemployment insurance claimants and for tenants who will face eviction following the termination of the moratoria. We are standing those programs up. The unemployment project will involve substantial numbers of private below market rate contract lawyers and also a partnership with NJP and the Unemployment Law Project. We expect to have that project up by May 15th. You can find information about the private attorney component on our website, okla.wa.gov/reports. We are working very closely with the Legal Foundation of Washington's grants team to make sure that, and our community-based volunteer attorney programs, to make sure that the principal focus of the eviction-related money is targeted to our state's housing justice projects, which are predominantly operated by our volunteer attorney programs. We asked for about $1.35 million for that component of the project. We may not be able to fund it at that level, but we should be able to fund it close. This work will continue through June 30th of 2021. And most significantly, maybe not most significantly, but importantly, all of the services that go through entities other than NJP can be made available to anybody regardless of immigration status. We continue to work with OFM to secure additional CARES Act money from what they call CV2, which is the CARES Act. And we are monitoring very closely the efforts to secure funding through CV4, which is the stimulus bill now currently under consideration or discussion in the Congress. So we are going to, I think I responded to a question last time, Sal, when you asked me what was Plan B and Plan C. And we're up to Plan Z. We're trying to find every single dollar we can possibly get to dedicate to emergency legal aid services for all of the people who we just heard about this morning.
Great. Thanks, Jim. And that's great news. Very exciting news. All right, we're going to hear from Caitlin, LFW.
Well, thank you. And I just wanted to begin my brief comments by extending the Legal Foundation's appreciation for the Alliance for Equal Justice. I'm kind of overwhelmed by hearing all of these reports and updates. And I want you to know that this great work just makes a huge difference, not only to low-income people, but I think to everyone in our state who depends on having fair and equitable access to the justice system. And it kind of blows me away. As Jim reported, the Legal Foundation is working closely with OCLA and with Northwest Justice Project on, now that we've secured some of the funds, on administering them quickly and efficiently to the programs targeted mostly unemployment law projects and the 9 volunteer lawyer programs who administer housing justice projects. That will be unfolding over the next few weeks. Since in the last 6 weeks, we have received over $50,000 in requests for grantee support in terms of expanding programs' ability to serve clients remotely. That's ongoing and continue to try to make those funds available to programs who need to continue the work. Another thing that we're actively working on and that we have not lost sight of is our race equity grant program that was established well before the COVID-19 crisis. We have a panel of community experts who are prepared to award $60,000 in the first round of funding. We received 21 applications as of April 15th, and our panel will be convening in the next couple of weeks to determine how those funds will be allocated. In other news, we're moving forward with other funding opportunities to help stabilize what we know will be an upcoming downturn in IOLTA funding. We have some significant grant prospects, and as Melinda will fill you in a couple minutes, we have some opportunities, sort of outside of the typical, I guess you would call, suspects. And finally, what I would like to use the last minute of my time to say is a special shout out to Columbia Legal Services for their work, along with other grantees, but especially their work at the Supreme Court last Thursday to create safer conditions for incarcerated people. I know it wasn't quite the result we hoped. It was a 5-4 decision, but this is, again, the kind of systemic advocacy, emergency advocacy that we expect from Columbia, and Nick Straley and his colleagues at CLS did a noble job, and I just want to put out a special appreciation for that work. So thank you.
Thanks, Caitlin. And then we're going to hear from Melinda from the Campaign for Equal Justice.
Thanks, Sal. And I want to echo Caitlin's thanks. It's wonderful and so energizing to hear all this information about what is going on the ground. One thing I know is that our supporters are hungry for information about how our grantees are being affected by this crisis. It helps us in our fundraising, and it's our goal to bring all the resources to bear that we can. So specifically, the campaign, of course, like many of our grantees, have launched a very aggressive Give Big campaign and a matching fund, and we've seen some good support for that. We've reached out to the Seattle Foundation. We continue to work with them to try to elevate legal aid, and they've included some grantees, but not all. They do have a second round of funding coming up, so we're working hard through many different avenues to try to reach them, through program officers, through people on the ground, through the Pandemic Advisory Group, through the United Way, and we'll continue to do that. We are considering reaching out to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which has in the past been a very understanding and really generous partner to the foundation. So we will see how that goes and keep you posted about that. We are reaching out, and Caitlin's been very helpful in this, in reaching out with and checking in with our law firm supporters. Things will change. I mean, things are going to be changing in the Campaign for Equal Justice going forward. So we're trying to keep those avenues and keep those conversations going. Our associates and corporate council campaigns, however, are in great shape for the fall. A lot of this work can still be done remotely, so we're really grateful for that. We have a LAFCO meeting coming up to continue to provide resources to grantees on the ground. That'll be in June. We have a tentative Voices for Justice concert that we're hoping can happen in the fall that will benefit the Campaign for Equal Justice. And we are in conversation with the Bar Association to develop a legal aid CLE that will include information on the court system, information on legal aid grantees. We want to develop this and then move it into, we're going to do sort of a broad-based statewide effort first, and then we'd like to take it around the state. We'd like to create a 1.5 credit CLE, which will include a half an ethics credit, and then move it around to the different counties where we have pro bono programs. So stay tuned for that. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Melinda. Anyone have announcements for upcoming events? Any, does Team Challenge coming up? I can't remember.
Thanks, Sal. We did have a live luncheon that was coming up on the 12th, but we've converted it to an online campaign. For those of you who are already supporters of Team Child financially, you probably got an email today with our live kickoff of our campaign. So that's going to go on for the next week or so. And thanks to everybody in advance for support and also to helping to amplify our reach through your networks.
Great, thanks, Andy. Any other announcements? Anybody have virtual gatherings or for their organizations? Seeing none, we're going to adjourn the meeting. Thank you all. Thank you all for all the work you're doing and making a difference for so many people. And stay safe and healthy, and we'll see you all soon.
Thank you.
Bye.